Morning. Did everybody have fun with SNL last night? BTS did an incredible job of breaking every stereotype that American men are used to, and justifiably so. And I'll be explaining that in a few minutes. First of all, I want to get my live stream up on my own cell phone so I can follow your chats, and that's sometimes more complicated than I think it should be, but anyway. Geez, where did this go? Maybe I can get to it this way. Good morning. Welcome. I'm going to have some amusing comments about what's happening in America thanks to BTS being on SNL last night. It was very exciting. And I will be talking to you about it a little later, but first I have to get my live stream up. So here it is, finally. I finally figured out how to find it. Okay, so I've got the live chat going, and all right. So today, in today's session, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to read from Mary Stein's book again, because this relates to what happened last night on SNL, Jung's Map of the Soul, an Introduction by Dr. Mary Stein. And today I'm going to read from a passage called Sexuality and Relationships, because it's so relevant to what was going down on SNL last night, and it was a lot of fun. I want to give people a little bit more time to join this live stream. So I'll read that, and then I have on my main desktop Boy with Love with Halsey, and I thought I would go through the lyrics of it with you and give you my reactions to the lyrics because they're very interesting. And last night what they did was they did a version of Boy with Love without Halsey, much to the disappointment of most American young men who are watching. And what I really had fun with this morning was looking at how American men have reacted when they first see BTS, and it had me just laughing because of the things that are going to change in the United States and around the world among all these toxic masculine men that we have running around. Because as one viewer said, this is the opposite of logos. And so, Jordan Peterson, eat your heart out. I wonder if he was watching last night. Oh, yeah. So, but first, let me read these 3 pages. It's called Sexuality and Relationships, and I'm on page 146 of Jung's Map of the Soul, an introduction by Dr. Mary Stein. And this is the book that BTS's new album is based upon. So you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about as we go on. So first of all, let's read this. Okay, so for good reason, many people steer clear of the shoals of the animus experience. The native defenses of the ego hold this temptation at a distance. Little boys run away from little girls who are too powerful and attractive, knowing intuitively that they are not able to meet the challenge. Grown men are sometimes wise enough to do the same, for the anima is a wrecker of conventional marriages and careers. Just think of the American vice president who's afraid to sit next to a woman at a dinner party, other than his wife. Women too will resist the call of the Dionysian animus, drawing them toward ecstasy and promises of fulfillment by abandoning themselves to love. For here also lie the dangers of dismemberment and madness. Think of the young women who camped out in front of the SNL studio for a week to see two songs performed on SNL. It is not without reason that many have prayed to be delivered from temptations beyond their ability to remain standing. One of Jung's favorite illustrations of the power of the animus was Rider Haggard's She, a second-rate novel that depicts an immortal femme fatale in the wilds of Africa whose commands must be obeyed. She who must be obeyed is not simply a humorous appellation for Rumpold's bossy wife. The phrase comes from Haggard's novel. She is an eternally dying and resurrecting goddess who leads men into the flames of passion and finally to their destruction. But Jung also felt that if one was able to endure the fires of emotion and passion, one could be transformed. The experience of the archetype of the collective unconscious and its powers can lead to a new state of consciousness in which the reality of the psyche becomes as convincing to the ego as the reality of the material world is to the senses. The anima animus, once experienced as transcendent and recognized as Maya, becomes the bridge to a wholly new apprehension of the world. The anima animus experience is the royal way, the via regia to the self. Jung's anima animus theory seems in part to be a highly imaginative variation on Freud's old theme of sexuality as the central source of libido. But in human sexuality, Jung sees a good deal more than, than animals rutting in heat and trying to relieve themselves of tension or to pursue pleasure. Psychic attractors are involved, and when they are distinguished from the accompanying biological activity, the image emerges. This image is a psychic fact whose source lies at the archetypal end of the psychic spectrum. It is wedded to the sexual instinct, and this combination gives the anima animus its driving physical power. Human sexuality is guided by the archetypal image, but the image is not reducible to the drive. We are attracted to certain people. Why does one choose this person for a soulmate and not another? This is governed by the images that are projected. Typically, the animus likes to project itself upon intellectuals and all kinds of heroes, including tenors, artists, sporting celebrities, etc. The anima has a predilection for everything that is unconscious, dark, equivocal, and unrelated at a loose end. In woman, and also for her vanity, frigidity, helplessness, and so forth. Why do such difficult women attract men so frequently and with such ease? Why is it that strong women often do attract men? Jung suggests that this predilection for weak and helpless women is based on an anima projection, the anima being undifferentiated and inferior in the unconscious of a strongly male-identified person. Age-old wisdom tells women that to attract a man, be helpless. The anima represents the undeveloped side of a man, where he is unconsciously helpless and at loose ends, dark and equivocal. He is attracted by that. Similarly, strong women will be attracted often to weak men, sometimes fatefully, and then become filled with fantasies of saving them from alcoholism or some other decrepitude. Again, they are seeking a lost part of themselves, the animus, who appears as an inferior male in projection. Or, if she is a weak and helpless woman, her unconscious may compensate with images of male competence, and she will find herself hopelessly attracted to an heroic animus projection carrier. Once persons get together and spend some time in each other's company, the ensuing relationship begins showing some other typical animus characteristics. In an intimate relationship, it is not only the egos of the partners that enter into the mixture of psyches, it is also the unconscious parts, importantly, the anima and animus. They have been there all along, supplying the attractors to both members of the couple. But now they appear surprisingly different from what they looked like in the courtship stage of the relationship. Here is Jung, the psychological realist, describing the situation. Quote, "No man can converse with an animus for 5 minutes without becoming the victim of his own anima. Anyone who still had enough sense of humor to listen objectively to the ensuing dialogue would be staggered by the vast number of commonplaces, misapplied truisms, cliches from newspapers and novels, shop-soiled platitudes of every description interspersed with vulgar abuse and brain-splitting lack of logic. It is a dialogue which, irrespective of its participants, is repeated millions and millions of times in all languages of the world and always remains essentially the same. On the male side, the anima becomes touchy, overly sensitive and emotional, and on the female side, the animus becomes abusive, power-ridden, and opinionated. This is not a pretty picture, and surely offers a stark contrast to the more romantic version of the Mysterium Conjunctionis, the mystical union of song and story. The one partner becomes possessed by the animus, an undifferentiated collection of opinions motivated by a power drive, and the other retreats into a mood that is undifferentiated and driven by the need for love. One is dogmatic, the other becomes withdrawn or emotional and starts throwing things around. It is a typical anima versus animus cat and dog fight. If the emotionality and vituperation, the heat and fireworks of this conflict dies down a bit, there is a possibility that things will have been said that are important for the couple. Once the egos are restored to their normal positions, they may even realize that some transcendent event has taken place. What was said was probably not very personal. It was more general, collective, perhaps even archetypal and universal. Perhaps there is a germ of wisdom hidden in the dark mass of material that has erupted from each partner. Perhaps some clarifications and insights can result from the storm that has now passed. This would be the work of consciousness, rising above the level of emotionality and arriving at insight and empathy. At the very least, one will have had a glimpse into the depths of oneself and of the other, into the emotional far reaches that are normally hidden behind the socialized and adapted persona. It would, of course, make sense to look at Jung's own life to amplify further the meaning of the anima figure held for him. That is beyond the scope of this study. I have used some passages from his autobiography, and biographical works are in print and others are underway that give fuller depictions of his profound relationships with women. Jung once said that all psychological theory is also personal confession, and this is especially true of these areas that speak of the inner figures and personalities of the psyche, such as the shadow, the anima animus, and the self. These concepts and abstract theories were based on concrete psychological experiences, much of it interpersonal and not only solitary and private. With respect to the anima, she was for Jung both a living inner reality, a true inner figure of the first rank, and she was also powerfully experienced by him in projection and in relationship, beginning early in life with his nursemaid and extending through his romantic courtship and marriage to Emma Rauschenbach and his deep and enduring relationship with Tony Wolff. The anima was a constant companion in Jung's inner and outer life. To him, she seemed to be the guide of his fate and the most profound experience of the self, a concept which I will describe in the following chapter, occurred for Jung in the conjunction between man and woman when the anima and animus were the guiding figures in their union. Okay, so that was what I wanted to read this morning from Dr. Stein's book. And now I'll go back and take a look at your comments and chat, and we'll start talking about last night with BTS. And I'm going to pass on all the good mornings. Good morning to everyone. I'm just going to talk about the meat of your chats here. Nia's interested in the lyrics breakdown. I'm going to do my best on that. I've got strength says, hello, yes, it's time to laugh a lot. Absolutely. And one of the interesting things that I heard in these videos about guys, actually, I can give you the names of them. Hold on a second. As you see, I'm still relegated to my cell phone, which is pain. Okay. So there's a compilation of straight guys falling for Jimin, part 2, and guys react to Jimin, part 1. And the YouTube ID for the second one is J, small a, small j, small l, capital A. Tell you what, I'm just going to show it to you, and hopefully you can read that and stop the video. I'll read it again here. Small l, small j, small l, capital A, Y, S, capital J, capital O, N, small n, 0, Z, Q. And that's capital Z, capital Q. And so you might want to go over and look at those just for amusement. They're extremely funny. And one of these bearded fellows who's watching BTS for the first time, he says, he says to his left brain, have you found anything? No. Okay, now why is that? Okay, well, that's a reference to the fact that the left brain is the logos brain, the rational brain, and what BTS is activating is entirely on the eros side, on the irrational side. And so the rational, toxic, masculine American man just can't compute when they watch something like last night's performance on SNL. And many of them saw it for the first time or will be seeing it on replay for the first time today. And this video gives you an opportunity to be a fly on the wall and see how these guys are reacting. But one of the key ideas in Jungian psychology is the idea of compensation. And when things get out of whack, then there's an enantiodromia, the tendency of things to become their opposite. And so because of the two wars in the Middle East and in Afghanistan over the last 25 years, we've had sort of a super increase in masculinity, very deep voices and beards and all that stuff. And so it's obvious that in the collective unconscious, women have been looking for something that's a compensation to that. And that's from the irrational side. So here we have a Korean boy band wearing pink outfits, colored hair, necklaces, and earrings, and which is sort of the complete opposite of this toxic masculinity we've had in the United States. And what is very clear is that all the young men who are of age with these young women who are with the women who are especially taken with BTS, and there are many ages, but the main age is sort of late teens, early 20s, which is a time for finding a mate in one's life. And I think many young women who are looking for a mate for the first time are unconsciously kind of turned off by this toxic masculinity. And so they're looking for something else. And so BTS is filling that role. And so one thing that you can be sure is that young men will follow the girls. And so because young women are especially attracted to BTS, and they're going to be talking about it lots in the next few weeks, especially leading up to the Billboard Awards announcement and also to the continued concerts and so on around the world with BTS. I expect that all the young men are going to start to pay attention, and they're going to, at first, they're just going to go, I have no idea what's happening to me. But then what they're going to start to do is they're going to start wearing loose-fitting clothes and very colorful outfits. There'll be a lot more pink in men's clothing and colored hair and other forms of acting out, which are typical of BTS. And so because the women are so taken with that, it's inevitable that the men are going to have to follow. And we saw that in the 50s and early 60s, especially with Elvis Presley and with the Beatles. Okay, because first the Elvis Presley came out, had his guitar, and he started to wiggle his hips, and that made all the women crazy. And so you saw that last night on Saturday Night Live. The boys weren't doing it quite as flagrantly as they've done on some of their music videos, but certainly they are doing that. So they're pointing toward that time with Elvis Presley and his moving hips. And then the Beatles came along, and the Beatles had long hair. Now, because I was raised in the military, I always had short hair. My father was a terrible barber, and he just took my hair off mostly. And even today, because I'm a retired Marine officer and I sometimes do honor salutes for dying veterans, and therefore I wear my Marine Corps uniform, I still keep my hair relatively short. But young guys let it grow. And certainly when I left active duty in 1971 and went to law school, I let my hair grow. I got a mustache, and that I was a little behind the times actually, but I was also married at that time. And but all the young guys who weren't in the Marine Marine Corps all grew long hair, and so in my college days there was a lot of long hair, and so now with BTS, and I'm pointing at the 27-inch screen on my iMac because I have Boy in Love on the screen so that I can talk about it a little later. And I need to stop it here. Hold on a second. I'm trying to control it from a distance, which is nice that you can do on, okay. And so anyway, I'm watching the screen, which is halfway across my room because of the way my room is set up. But anyway, so what is going to happen now is the men, young men especially, are going to start following the BTS men because that's what all the women are interested in. And of course, then last night, what happened? Emma Stone comes out and she starts to do her opening monologue, and one of the things she says is, "And BTS is here," and immediately there's this scream from the audience. This is a primal scream, and it's young women in a primal scream, and and of course we had screams like that for Elvis Presley and the Beatles. There was a little pushback a little later in the 60s when the Rolling Stones came in, and they were more masculine in their presentation than the Beatles were. But this period from mid 50s to the mid 60s was this period of the Beatles and Elvis Presley and the moving hips, and we're definitely seeing that in the BTS presentation. And so we will start to see in the United States men who are emulating BTS. And it's a good thing because we've gotten over masculinized in the United States, especially. And Jordan Peterson has certainly sold the logos, but there's a whole other side of the brain and there's a whole other side of life, and that's what BTS represents. And so they're filling in a wholeness that we all need and has obviously been missing in society around the world. And so the 80 million, up till now, 80 million armies around the world, these armies are the name given to the BTS fan group. They can't be wrong. Okay, they're not wrong. And they're reacting, they're feeling this unconscious need for a little less toxic masculinity. And so when they see BTS, wow, that's what they think they want. It's coming from the unconscious, it's coming from the collective unconscious. And the primal scream you're hearing from the young women, okay, that's, probably there were primal screams back before there were human beings, and they have an archetypal pattern to them. But once you see a group like BTS who can dance in great unison and so on, then it attracts the collective. And when millions of people were watching SNL last night and they suddenly hear the scream, now the collective all over the world where people have been listening to the primal scream, they're all going to be drawn into it. And this is an archetypal pattern, and once it begins, it never stops. Okay, so let's understand what's happening in an archetype like that. When an archetype is constellated, okay, and that means, remember we were talking about an archetype being like a canyon, a dry canyon or a dry riverbed, and suddenly you constellate it by putting life through it. Think of water going through that canyon. Once you start putting life through it, then that is a pattern that plays through, and it plays through perfectly, and it doesn't stop until it's over. And that, uh, for the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, it hasn't been over for 50 years, more than 50 years, 60 years. And even when I was looking at the most popular concerts in history, it was the return tour of the Rolling Stones, which was still number 3. And they had only done a very few concerts as compared to Ed Sheeran, who was number 4. He had done 205. And I think the Stones had done, well, actually, I wrote it down so I can tell you. The Stones had done 144 concerts and raised $674 million. Ed Sheeran did 205 so far, and he's still on it theoretically, and he did $556 million. So that he's number 4 in concert tours. But I think we're about to see BTS, which apparently is on a concert tour right now, and their concert tour is probably going to break all the records, is what I guess. When they're scalping tickets at $2,200 a seat, that starts to get pretty dear for courting. I remember in my youth, when I was in college, I took my ex-girlfriend to 2 Rolling Stones concerts about 2 years apart, and I could afford it based on money that I had at that time. But if you have to pay $2,200 a seat, that's going to be a very special audience. Okay, so let me go back and look at your comments. Okay, and Nia says, there's nothing more fragile than white men convinced of their own superiority by virtue of them being white and male. Absolutely. And that's crushed now. That's gone. And they don't know it yet. I mean, they probably saw SNL last night, but they still don't know what's happening. But it is... that fragility is going to be broken like crystal. And as Edward Edinger once said, Mother Nature is imperious. Okay, so Mother Nature will have her way, and that's what's happening with BTS. And Nia says, yes, I was reading Mary's book. And okay, so Senator Bush says, what are anima animus? Just briefly, please. Okay, the anima is a structure in the psyche that is a feminine structure in a man's psyche and a masculine structure in a woman's psyche. And it's a lens through which we look out. And so, for example, in my case, my anima imagines a certain perfect woman for me, and everyone has a different one. But my anima, and very often it might be like your mother or your father if you're a woman. And so in my case, I found a picture of my mother when she was 18 years old, which was taken only a year before I was born. And she was quite lovely, and she had long brown hair. And I've showed it a few times on earlier videos. I will show it again when I can broadcast from my desktop, but right now I can't do that. So you'll have to go back and look. But you can imagine she was a lovely young woman, 18 years old, in a blue sweater and long brown hair. Well, both of my wives and all of the women that I've ever been seriously attracted to have met that template. And so my anima, that's my anima, that provides that template of what a perfect woman looks like to me. But everybody has a different one, and women have a template of the perfect male, for example. Okay. And everybody needs to buy this book, and that she's talking about Mary Stein's book, Jung's Map of the Soul, an Introduction, which is the basis of this new BTS album. And Nia says, anima, the feminine, female energy in men, animus, the male energy in men. Well, no, the male energy in women. But it can be somewhere on a scale, so it's not always perfectly that way. That's if you're a typical person, that's true. And she says, I use the word energy, but not sure it's a good descriptor. It's a good descriptor. So Nia says, I tend to call Jimin a converter due to the fact heterosexual men react to him quite strongly. It's quite funny and really shows which men are comfortable with their masculinity. And definitely, we're seeing that in those videos of men seeing Jimin for the first time. And they're definitely reacting. And so if you're late, Jacqueline, by all means, go back and listen to the replay. I don't understand why my camera is going bad. Okay. Senator Bush, my husband's bias is Suga. He fully admits he would at least cuddle with him if given an opportunity. And well, we'll go on. We'll talk more about that. Miles says, how much more powerful would the performance have been with Halsey insofar as attracting a wider audience, or were they I just had my screen shut down. I hope you're all still with me. For some reason, my screen is deciding to stop on me, and I don't know why. But I've only had this iPhone for 5 days, so I'll learn it. So I think, Miles, I think your observation is right. I don't think it would have been so much more impactful to have Halsey there, but the fact that the music video has Halsey in it has to immediately trigger the jealousy of all American men who were in love with Halsey, because here's Halsey, who's an anima carrier of Americans and white men around the world, and suddenly she's singing and dancing with this Korean boy band, and oh my goodness, how much jealousy is that going to generate? A lot. Okay, so Senator Bush says her debut with them will be on the Billboard Awards on May 1st, and that should be a wild thing. And I've got strict. Halsey will be with them on BBMA. Wigs will fly. Maybe you could tell me if when my iPhone shuts down on me, are you seeing a shutdown? I don't know if you are or not, but it's happened to me twice now, just as I've been broadcasting. Nia says, I think it was scheduling issues, not a conscious choice, but probably men would have reacted less ignorantly online. Yeah, I suppose that's true. And this is going to be a continuing saga for the next, well, probably at least the next 5 years. And of course, this generation will be talking about this moment forever, because it's a watershed moment in culture, very much like Elvis and the Beatles were in my generation. And Carlos says, I must admit I love Elvis. Yeah, I love Elvis too. Miles, I don't have SNL access, so have not seen the performance. Well, it's on YouTube. And if I keep leaning forward, it's because of my screen trying to shut down on me. And so Nia says many heterosexual BTS fanboys are interested in fashion, and they do copy BTS's style. So that's very true. I've seen people get tattooed or their hair dyed according to favorite members. That may be. Shaklan says, I feel like boys and men have tried this out, but still ultimately failed due to toxic masculinity with the recent concept of soft boys. And there's a reference with one of my groups of friends who are called Uber Boyo. You can find my interview with Uber Boyo on the homepage of this YouTube channel. And they refer to soy boys. And, they're about to see the Enantiodromia coming in on them too. And so anyway, the SNL performance is on YouTube, Miles, and you can find it. And I've got strength, but you saw what BTS did. They decided to make their second performance more catered to men, going with hip hop vibe that men are used to. This should help. Still live there. Okay, so if this keeps shutting down, I'll keep starting it up again, but I don't know why it's doing that. And so, yeah, well, men are going to get used to it, and suddenly we will see maleness within something that looks rather effeminate to many men up till now, I'm sure. But we're going to see that there is maleness in these performances and in this attire and these personas that these men are presenting, because we have to remember this is a album about persona, and so they're presenting a persona which is sort of extremely effeminate, but underneath that is also a masculine persona, which is also very obvious if you take your time to listen to it. And so anyway, let's see. And Miles says, I had long hair and a Jesus Christ Superstar shirt in elementary school in the late 60s, rather out of the norm at the time. Nia says, I think mic drop was chosen. Can't tell whether I'm going offline each time that thing resets, which is very irritating, but I'll just keep hitting my screen and maybe that'll keep it from doing it. And Senator Bush says, Boy with Love on U.S. radio. They said it would be by my city. Hasn't played it yet. I think it will be, because it's a very good beat, and the lyrics are good. And, I haven't understood a lyric in any popular band in 40 years or 50 years, ever since the time of folk music, back when Peter, Paul, and Mary and those folks were singing, we could understand what the lyrics are, but I haven't been able to hear lyrics in songs for years. And so you've always had to go back and look for the lyrics. And Hermit Nick, Elvis, BTS, Beatles, entertainers all remind me of idols of ego. Well, they're certainly idols of persona. And that's their point, Hermit Nick. Mace says, we love BTS. They're always do their best on their performances, especially if they're doing it live. And I'm suing Jungi, period. What is going on? I don't know what that comment means. If we start to get hackers on this chat, however, I trust my regular users to start filing reports immediately on those people, and they will be blocked from my YouTube channel. And Senator Bush, I heard the Elvis Duran interview heard L.A. was supposed to be playing it too. It will, okay. It may be very true that the men that are complaining about BTS um, the most are ones that are sexually attracted to them. That could be at some level. Um, and Carlos says, although it's important for men to embrace their feminine side, strong masculinity will always be necessary, particularly for strong leaders. Well, yes and no. We have a lot of women leaders around the world too who've been quite strong, and even in the Muslim world, that's true. And I think of the prime ministers of Pakistan and Bangladesh who have been women. So um, I think these are a sliding scale, and it doesn't matter per se on born gender per se. Um, so, um, and Pyoshni says the toxic masculinity is worse in most Asian countries. They have placed the entire gender higher in the family hierarchy, which is rarely questioned. I'm sure that's true. Um, and so I obviously cannot keep up with all these chats. Um, and okay, I hope, really don't know if I really don't know if you're getting blocked when I lose my phone, but I'll just keep hitting my screen for the time being. And Hermit says, Stoicism is masculinity, in my opinion. The concept of toxic masculinity is degrading when our society does not recognize toxic femininity. Well, I think there's both in society, and we have to be careful. Gray says the negative aspect of the feminine is usually represented as the Ouroboros. Okay, and it has been represented by Jordan Peterson as chaos, or he wants the rules, and he doesn't want to recognize that there's both rational and irrational, and so what BTS represents is the irrational side of the equation, and that's where life is, and so we're about to see an empirical study in Jungian psychology on a grand scale, I would say. Okay, I'm going to skip some of these. I will be grateful for anybody that wants to put in a super chat, which you can do on the little $ at the bottom of the chat. That helps me pay for the new equipment that I need, um, and so I will do my best to respond to all super chats, but I probably can't keep up here. Army Love. Hello, sir. BTS Persona album, Boy with Love, is a happy song. Maybe the next album is about shadow, and it may be a lonely album. Okay. In answer, ego is not the answer. Could I go over syzygy as presented in Ion by Edinger? Okay, so that's an important point that Gray has raised, which is that the anima and animus are yoked together, and that's what a syzygy is. So all these scales and opposites are actually yoked together. So in the Myers-Briggs, for example, you're somewhere on a scale between extrovert and introvert. That's yoked together. That's a syzygy. You're actually on a scale between sensing, where you're seeing all the facts, and intuitive, where you don't need to see all the facts, but you can just guess the facts. You're on somewhere on that scale. Well, everybody is on the anima animus scale, And so you're yoked together with that anima scale. And where you are on that scale may change over time, depending on what the situation is. And so, as I said, we've seen um, masculinity push into the culture in the United States in the last 25 years. But now we're about to see a pushback. Uh, and and so it's going to be an interesting time, to say the least, because these young men can't be any different from that, from the toxic masculinity we've had. And just trying to make sure I keep the boy in love thing on the other screen. I'm having trouble here. Uh, Nia says every woman grows hair on her face, and many actually could grow beards. Yeah, I suppose, that's certainly true. Uh, one of my grandmothers had that. And Vaishali, I think the cultural concept of ego, or acting cute, regardless of gender, as an entertaining act helps create. This is very irritating. I had to. Last night I had to restore from my old iPhone. I successfully did that, but when I did, it apparently changed my settings of how often my iPhone is going to shut off on me. And it's apparently doing that every minute or something. So I'll have to change that setting, but anyway, I apologize for that. I hope that answered the question that you raised, Gray, and I appreciate the super chat. Peter, both the rational and irrational can get out of balance in individuals and societies. Absolutely true. And it certainly has in many places. And, um, authoritarianism is the opposite of complete freedom and, running around, everybody running around whatever, without clothes on or whatever. And we're somewhere in the middle of that. What we can say with clarity is that authoritarian countries get left behind economically and so on. Their leaders may stay in power because they're authoritarian and they use violence and other fear systems to stay in power, but ultimately they always fail, as Mohandas Gandhi once observed. Think of it always, they always fail. And so, but while they're in power, they seem very strong. But if you look at the countries around the world that have adopted a really authoritarian attitude, they have not developed as fast as the rest of the world. And so it can't be, complete freedom, but obviously we have to have freedom in order to advance humanity. And so Hosni Mubarak thought, as an authoritarian, that he could shut down the internet in Egypt in 2011 when the Arab Spring came along. And so he did that. And within 3 to 4 days, he found that bread wasn't getting made in the bakeries because everybody had been relying on the internet for placing their orders for materials and so on. And so the world has become dependent on the internet and on commercial uses of the internet. And so we have to have an open internet, and the countries that don't allow an open internet are being left behind. They're not as creative as the societies that allow it. And so, I mean, that goes even for China or North Korea. The poverty in North Korea is obviously very terrible. And but they have the country shut down. Those authoritarians that control the North, they've got it totally shut down, and so it's great for the ruling family, but it's not good for most anybody else. And and so there's a balance between the two. You can also be too free, and then also you run into problems. Um, And so I've got strength says, I'm afraid that you will start reading a book or discussing lyrics and we will miss pieces because of the screen problem. I'm hopeful that that will not happen. I'm continuing to push the button regularly here. And And Nia says, Miles, if you're interested, look up the lyrics to the song Sea by BTS. That's where we really went into that desert sea analogy. Okay, I seem to have gotten to the bottom of the chat. And so for the moment, what I'm going to do, okay, been juggling things. All right. So first of all, I want to give sort of my reactions to last night's performance. And I spoke about the primal scream. And that primal scream is a way of creating a collective. Okay. So once one or five young girls start screaming in an audience, they all will scream in an audience. That's a collective thing. And there's not any rationality to it. It's just it it suddenly becomes a collective activity, and and so now that men around the world have seen young girls screaming on SNL, and they'll see it again on the BBMA on May 1st. Um, they're going to start paying attention because the anima is the part of your psyche, if you're a man, that draws you into life, and the animus is the part of your psyche as a woman in general. Now I'm talking in general terms, and I'm not talking about gender per se, but it's that psychological function that draws you into life. And so what we have with Boy with Love is a song about being drawn into life and about being drawn into the future. And so I remember in the album Graceland by Paul Simon, there was a song called That Was Your Mother. And it's played to a zydeco beat, which is a very unusual beat in American culture. It's very popular in the New Orleans area, but it's not very well known in other parts of the country. And it's a dance beat, so it's for dancing. And we have a local venue where some of our favorite singers sing, and they sing a lot of acoustic music, and they typically are folk singers and that sort of thing. But one time, a Zydeco band came to that venue, and it was very funny because they said, "We can't play this as a concert because we don't play that way." They're basically jazz musicians, but to a Zydeco beat. And they expect to be playing when people are dancing, and so they can't interact with the audience if people aren't dancing. So they made everybody move all the tables aside so that we would start dancing to the Zydeco. So anyway, in this song by Paul Simon, he talked about how a young man gets into attracting a young woman. And he says part of the lyric is get her in a conversation, drink a little red wine, dance to the music of Clifton Chenier, the the beat of the zydeco or something like that. And so in Boy with Love, we see exactly that. And we see the BTS guys in the music video, and they're actually doing the steps of courtship of their anima figure. Okay, and now it happens that Halsey is carrying that anima figure in that music video. It doesn't mean that any of them are going to fall in love with Halsey, but it's a brilliant marketing tack. And so at the beginning here, we have a young man saying, let me put my, let's see here. Need to figure out how I'm doing this with my trackpad here. Okay. All right. I'll tell you what. I'm going to shut this live stream down for just a minute and see if I can find this setting, because it's not going to work well if I have to keep stopping to tell it I'm still alive. So I'm going to go out of the live stream for a minute, find the setting, and come back, and hopefully then I will be able to do Boy with Love. So let's see what happens. Okay, I'm live again. I'm not sure I did anything. I apologize. I don't know if I was even on the screen during that period, but I will now do my best to go and talk about Boy with Love, and I'll try to keep the screen going as well. Hopefully it will all work. And so let me go back to the beginning again, because the music video has been playing. And a few of you are still here, so thank you. Miles or Nia or Greg, can you tell me whether I've been going off in those moments? And so Shocklin says, could collaborating with an openly bisexual artist such as Halsey have anything to do with the concept of anima and animus? Well, almost everything has something to do with anima and animus, but I don't think we're talking about bisexuality here per se. We're really talking about what attracts the opposite sex, and the fact that we have to, if we're going to reproduce, which is where Mother Nature becomes imperious, we have to attract the opposite sex. And so my point is that what's happening is young women are being very attracted to BTS. And so if the young women go there, the young men are going to have to go there in order, or not become like BTS necessarily, but they're going to have to cut down on the hypermasculinity in order to be attractive to young women. That is my point. Okay, so Boy with Love begins with a lyric something like, how was your day? Okay, so that goes back to what I was saying earlier about Paul Simon's song and the idea of get her into a conversation. And also, these are archetypal mating rituals. I think a couple of days ago I was talking about the mating rituals of osprey. So there are three things that an osprey male must do. The first thing is a sky dance. In other words, the male osprey has to get the attention of the female. And so obviously BTS has gotten the attention of the female. And obviously in Paul Simon's song, Get Her, That Was Your Mother, he says, get her in a conversation. So attract her into a conversation in some way. So for the osprey, it's called a sky dance. Okay, the next step is the male osprey has to bring a fish. In other words, he has to feed his mate because it's the women who have to reproduce the species. And so the women need to know that the men are going to protect them during this time of their great vulnerability when they're raising the young, whether that's for an osprey, which is 2 months, but for a human baby, that's 18 to 20 years at least. And so young women, as they're thinking about a mate, need to know that the male will be there. And so far, what we have in Boy with Love is only getting their attention, okay, which is a lot of singing and dancing, and obviously that's getting the attention of a lot of young women. And Nia says, Boy with Love is a follow-up to Boy in Love. The latter was quite juvenile. It portrayed a teen boy's more hormonal approach to a teen girl, right? And so this is more finding a way to get the attention of young women. And Nia says they specifically ask, how did Dad ask out Mom? In a contrast, they know now how to treat a lady right for her attention. And I would say that's true. Okay, so you have to be in a conversation, and you have to draw your prospective mate out. And so the one early lyric here is, what makes you happy? And so obviously you have to listen. And there's a psychological principle called anatomy of dependence, and there's a book by that name, and it was by a Japanese man named Doi, and what he taught is that you have to draw people out so that there's an interaction, and that builds a relationship. In psychology, this is called a rebus. And this rebus is a metaphysical place where you and your partner can be safe together, basically, is what it means. And in that metaphysical place, only the two of you knows what's going on in that space. So when a husband and wife are together for 30 years, they have this egg of metaphysical space around them. It's in the psyche. And that is something that only the two of them ever can know, but it happens not only in marriages, but it happens like in the Marine Corps. Like I said, I can't hope to even convey to you what it means to be a Marine, and to say that, I'm a Marine. You wouldn't appreciate it if you've never been a Marine. And so again, or if you're a BTS Army and you were a BTS Army suppose you were a BTS Army in 2016 or 2015, you could not convey to me what it was like to be a BTS Army in 2015. You just wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to put enough words together. And if you saw the SNL live last night, you would not be able to convey to anybody else, and I cannot convey what I saw entirely, because that is a special moment in time, and only those who saw it live can appreciate the significance of it and what was going on with that last night. And it says, by the way, the Korean title of Boy with Love means a poem for the tiny things. What's your personal interpretation of that? Um, well, let's see. A poem for the tiny things. Well, it's a poem is obviously metaphorical, and it refers to culture and how things are going to happen. Um, but you can't express it, which is what I'm talking about, the inability to express um, the inability to express irrational things, number one. And so that's what a poem is about. So if you write a good poem, you're not talking about what you're really talking about. You're talking about something else. So, for example, I wrote a book called Seduction for the Soul under my pen name, David Garrettson. And so in that book, one of the poems is called Symphony. And the first lines, I can't recite the whole thing right now, but the first lines were, I want to play you like a symphony, draw rosin bow across your silken breast with driving rhythms from the timpani. Okay, so obviously I wasn't talking about classical music in that song, in that poem, but uh, everybody gets the metaphor of what I was talking about. And so I want to play you like a symphony. So that's what a poem does. And so poem for the tiny things, I suspect that the tiny things here refers to each one of us. We're all so small in comparison to the whole of society, and yet it's only the individual who can make any change whatsoever. And so here we have 7 individuals who are going to change the world and change the way men and women interact around the world. That's what's happening with BTS, and that's a phenomenal thing to watch and be able to watch as an example of Dr. Jung's psychology. Center Bush, slightly off topic in some lyrics and other songs on this album. They mention being reborn or being born twice, with rebooting Boy in Love with Boy with Love. And with this album on the whole, um, do you think this could be a symbolic rebirth for BTS? Yes. And they even say that this is a comeback album. So that's a rebirth. And when we talk about rebirth, this relates to what I've talked about recently, which is the Job archetype: contest, defeat, lamentation, and rebirth. That's a cycle that you have to go through many times in your lifetime in order to build a strong ego. So these young men have built very strong egos. They've been put down time and time again, as the armies have told me over the last couple of weeks, many times, that they were put down many times, but they keep coming back. And so they've lamented about what happened to them in various stages of their life up till now. And now they're having a comeback. So that's a rebirth. So you're quite right that that's a metaphor for that. And when born again Christians say they're reborn, it doesn't mean that they're reborn physically. It means they're born into the spiritual level of life. And so I've got strength. BTS often talk how they want to create memories together with armies so that we could communicate just through an eye contact. And they're obviously doing that in this video. Um, and it can't be explained to other people, like you said about Marines. Yeah. And so nobody, people who weren't armies in 2015 aren't really going to get it. And there's no hope to get it. And I don't hope to get it. I'm not suggesting that I get it. I mean, I see the sea change of global attitude that's happening as a result of what these young men are doing. But I can't possibly get exactly what they've communicated with their armies over the years. Um, okay, so I'm going on. So the lyric we're at is "What makes you happy?" So the BTS is obviously saying, when I talk to a young woman with whom I am in love, I need to find out from her what makes her happy, and that's a way of beginning the relationship, and that's why I read the relationship part of this book at the beginning of this session. Okay, so then and then it says, "Oh, text me." Okay, so "Oh, text me" obviously says, let's be in communication, because, and just like Paul Simon said in That Was Your Mother, um, get her in a conversation, because if you're in a conversation, then you can communicate and develop a relationship that may lead somewhere. It may lead to marriage, it may lead to a one night stand. Who knows? That's for you to decide morally in your own life. And that's a different question. But in a mating ritual, you want to have communication between the man and the woman, the male and the female. And so in the osprey, it's archetypal. It goes back to the archetype um, in the osprey, where the male is bringing the female a fish, and that's a communication. It says, I'm going to be here for you when you lay the eggs, and I'm going to bring you the food that you're going to need, and I'm going to protect you when the eagle comes and tries to attack you. And so that's a long message there that's all expressed by bringing her a fish. Okay, the final step for the osprey is building a nest, and so they're not to that point yet in this album. I don't think they're talking about their persona. They're representing themselves to a woman that they're interested in, or a man. I don't know. I'm not talking about their sexuality per se or their sexual preference. I'm just saying that they're not at this stage of building a safe place, a safe environment in which to reproduce. Um, and so "Oh, text me," that is talking about getting in communication. And then it says, "Your every picture." So it's another way of drawing someone into the interest between the two parties. Um, and and then it says, "I want to have it by my pillow, obey." Okay, so um, the lyric is, "I want to have your picture by my pillow." It means I want to keep you close, even though you may not be close, but I'll have your picture with me. And obey is before anyone else, I guess, is what that stands for. Or in my time, it was called your OAO, your one and only. But nowadays, I think sometimes people have multiple partners, and so you would say before anyone else. Okay, maybe I have someone else, but that isn't the important one for me. Um, and Mia says their new album is about their persona as an artist and idol, and connected with the army. That why most of songs in the album talking about their relationship with the army. Okay, well, that's fair enough. Um, but it's also about this stage of life. I mean, because we're addressing a stage of life here. And as I've said earlier, my intuition, and I haven't gone and studied this in detail, but my intuition is this series of albums is telling a story, not only of those seven men, but it's telling all of our stories, okay, because it's connecting with so many people around the world. And Nia says there's an interesting grammar in the next verse that gets lost in English, where they say "teach me" in Korean. It actually carries the nuance "teach me so it benefits me," um, and I might have a slightly different reaction to that. But let me go on here. Um, so we've been at with the picture on the pillow, and the next lyric is "Come be my teacher," and so that obviously is again trying to make a connection with someone. And here we have the various members of the BTS coming toward the camera directly and looking directly into the camera with a very loving look. Okay, if uh, if you want to get deeply into someone's soul, then when you're making love with them, look them directly in the eye during that act if you can. And so the eye is the entrance to the soul, and these young men know it, so they're looking directly into the camera with a very come hither look, and it's very obvious. So come be my teacher. I want you to be my teacher. Okay, and teach me everything about you. Um, so he's trying to draw his partner out, and so his partner is the armies, and so I grant you that they're trying to communicate with the armies, but they're also causing millions of girls to fall in love with them very definitely through this artifice of looking directly into the camera. Um, and then he says, "You're one, you're two." Now, that is a reference to the two personalities that one has in the deep unconscious or in the unconscious. One is the ego, and the other is the self. The ego is personality number one, and the self is personality number two. So, someone that wants to have a loving long term relationship with someone else obviously wants to know not only the persona and the ego level of what this person is, they also want to know their soul, their deepest self, because then that's a strong connection. And the term we had for it in the 80s, 90s was soulmate. So your soulmate is someone who connects with you at this deep unconscious level. And Dr. Stein, in his book, is referring to the animus as the soul and self level, or at least the filter through which the soul communicates. Um, and so let's go on. You're one, you're two. So your ego and your deep unconscious, flying high in the sky. Okay, so um, when you're in the act of making love, you can have the impression that you're having this numinous experience of flying high in the sky. And one of the most numinous experiences one can have is to be in the act of making love. And so that, to me, that's what that refers to, but it could refer to something else. And with the two wings you gave me back then. Okay, so uh, what they're saying is that you, by your relationship with me, you, my intended, my person that I want to attract, you've given me wings because this is Mother Nature being imperious and giving you a life interest. Okay, remember that anima always draws men into life, and animus draws women into life, and what that causes is reproduction of the next generation, ultimately. And so Mother Nature has her ways, and one of those ways is to have the feeling that you're given wings, that something new, wonderful is happening in your life. So that's what's going on there, I think. Um, and so then the next thing they say is, now it's so high up here. So once that process begins, now, okay, you're up in the air with this intended, and what are you going to do about that? Then things start to get serious, and that's when the nest building starts to come up, and it's sort of a fearful reaction. And let's see, I want you tuned into my eyes. So here, all the guys are singing at the camera, and they want you to focus on their eyes, and that is, a technique of seduction. So very often you would look across a room at somebody that interested you and give them a look, and that connection could be the beginning of something great, or it could be the beginning of disaster, depending on how you deal with the situation and what your own personal situation is at the time. But these guys are definitely on the make, and so they want you to look into their eyes because they want you to fall in love with them, of course, because that's what you want. If you're a successful group, you want people to be in love with you, with them for the rest of their lives, which they will be. And so Senator Bush says, I really like that. What I would like to learn Korean. I may find a good online source, just something to get me going. I would recommend the Pimsleur method, which you put on your iPhone and you simply listen and repeat for 30 days, and you'll have a basic vocabulary. And each daily lesson is 30 minutes. And I have studied both Arabic and Spanish that way, and I think it's far better than the year I spent in Chinese language school, so I can recommend that. And Nia says a previous album was titled Wings. It was an error when they drew heavily from Hess's Damien. A trailer of their world tour then had a literal graphic with wings growing out of the members' backs. Okay, well, so Hermann Hesse was a coming-of-age novel, and so this is, when you're born, you don't know anything. You grow up and you learn how to be a human being, and then you get to a certain point in life where you see that, you have the power to do some things that your parents have done. And so that's a kind of freedom. And I will go back to the Wings album at some point, but not today. And so Nia gave some recommendations. Okay, all right, so going on now. So I want you tuned into my eyes. Then, yeah, you making me a boy with love. So obviously, these are young men who are feeling their hormonal changes that are normal in adolescence and late adolescence. And obviously, they're a bit beyond that because I know RM is now 24, but they're, in terms of their message that they're giving to the armies or to their intended, they're giving they're saying that I'm having a feeling of being in love with you, and obviously, and then they say, oh my, whoops, got a little bit too far. And okay, the lyric is, "You got me high so fast." Okay, so that's sort of like love at first sight. Suddenly you see somebody and that's the one for you. Now that's probably your anima or animus talking, because that's what my anima does to me all the time. Every time I see a woman with long brown hair, um, then my animus says, that's the girl for you, except I'm already married and it happens very frequently to me. And so I now know, okay, anima, cool your jets. I know your tricks. Be careful. And so when you have love at first sight, that's you got me high so fast. Okay, and I want to be with you for everything. Obviously, um, any courtship would be about wanting to be with you for everything. And obviously, it's more than just wanting to be with the armies, because they will be with the armies forever, but not for everything. I mean, obviously, there's 7 of them, and no matter how their personal life goes, they're not going to be with 80 million armies around the world for everything. The armies are going to have to get a life for themselves. But and so this is definitely a courtship video where they're saying, I want to be with you for everything. And they're introducing Halsey, which suggests the innuendo that they all 7 want to be with Halsey. Now, Halsey isn't necessarily going to be with them. Okay. Okay. So then, what's the next thing? Okay, lots of oh my, oh my, you got me fly so fast. Okay, so this is flying, maybe a numinous experience of some sort. It could be as simple as a first kiss, but you know, ultimately, all these things lead to a conjunction, a mystical union, mysterium conjunctionis, which is the bringing together of 2 sides of an equation. And that's why men and women have been together since the beginning of human time, because they have to be. You're not complete unless you have the other side with you. And then he says, now I kind of get it. Okay, so they have gotten it. They definitely have gotten Mary Stein's book to a high degree. And then they say, love is nothing stronger. This again is, as I say, Mother Nature is imperious. And so there's nothing stronger than this connection that has to be made between young men and young women early on in their lives, so that the next generation can be produced. So love is nothing stronger, absolutely, than a boy with love. Okay, well, a boy that's in love with a girl is going to be very persistent, and a girl that's in love with a boy is also going to be very persistent. It works both ways. They happen to be all men, so they're interested in attracting a mate, and there's nothing stronger than that. Um, and then the scene with the sofa, and they say that a boy with love again. And then from the moment I met you, my life was all you. Yeah. Okay, so again, we're talking about love at first sight here, and this is the one for me, which is the anima or the animus talking, saying that's the one for you. The problem is that these are unconscious psychic processes that go on throughout life. And so here I am, 72, and my anima is still saying that's the girl for you, except that I have a wife. And so I know that that's not the girl for me. And so I say, okay, anima, cool down. now. And but here they're talking about love at first sight. You're the star that turns ordinaries into extraordinaries. Okay, so when you develop this relationship with someone else, um, there's about just under 4 billion men and just under 4 billion women around the world. And so most of those are pretty ordinary. But the relationship that can develop between an individual couple, whoever they are, regardless of gender now, I'm just talking about the couple relationship and the guide toward wholeness. Um, that person that you do that with brings you into a numinous level, a magical level that is quite different. It's a religious experience, and it makes things extraordinary. Okay, and if you're still here watching this, maybe I'm giving you a little bit of a religious experience by giving you an aha moment. I hope that's happening, and the fact that you're still here suggests I'm doing something. But still, we're not courting here. But these fellows in this song definitely are on the make. Okay, one after another, everything is special. And so when you have this love relationship, definitely everything is special. Um, the things you're interested in, the way you walk or talk, and every little trivial habits of you. Okay, so this again is the beginning of the love relationship. It's a projection, as Dr. Stein talks about projections, and you think everything is perfect. And so think of marriages and the honeymoon phase. So, how long does the honeymoon period go? Well, it goes 6 or 8 weeks, but eventually, after the honeymoon, um, now remember, before marriage, the two people in the family or in the new marriage are focusing on one another. They're getting to know one another. They get to the point of courtship and then marriage, and there's this honeymoon period, and all that goes through mostly through projection. But then, um, you know, 2 months into the marriage, now you don't have to spend so much time focusing on one another anymore. Now you have to focus as a team. Now you're a couple, a pair, and you have to start building your life. And so now you focus outward. And also, you find out that your spouse has some habits that you maybe don't like. And you have to learn how to integrate those, bring those into your psyche, and accept those parts of your partner that you find out about that you didn't know about. And you have to integrate those into your relationship. And if you can't integrate those, ultimately that's why marriages break up. But if you know that you have to do that, then you know that after a couple of months, you're facing outward um, to the world. You're not focusing on one another so much anymore. And and I was just thinking of a joke my mother told me years ago, but um, you're you have different things to do in your life changes, and so you may focus on one another in terms of reproduction, and oh boy, by the way, now we're going to be three and there's going to be a baby here, and now we're going to be a family together, and so your attitudes have to change. um, and So Senator Bush says we want to communicate with them and show them how devoted we are as fans. Plus, it never hurts to learn a new language anyway. And certainly, you're communicating with them by your applause and screams at their concerts. And that's one form of communication at a very primal level. Nia, in Europe, I think most school mandatorily require at least one foreign language, but I've seen rejection toward language learning from US Americans quite frequently. And yes, this is a problem in my society. Um, and obviously, although all of you can communicate with me in English, um, although I studied Mandarin Chinese and at one time was almost like a native speaker, except for a little bit of a Beijing accent. But on the telephone, if I spoke to a Chinese person 50 years ago, they couldn't tell that I wasn't Chinese. They would just think I was from Beijing. And and but now I definitely have an American accent when I speak Chinese, and I can't speak it fluently like I could then, and the same with my Japanese. Um, and so BTS Robobecca says BTS stands out for their message of self acceptance. They've wanted to give up many times to the voices of others, but are overcoming that to accept themselves. Absolutely. And that's something we all have to do is first accept ourselves. Um, and so, going back to the lyric here, the things you're interested in, the way you walk or talk, and every kind of trivial habits of yours. So, that's still during the courtship phase that you're trying to get all those things about your partner. And then everyone says that I used to be so little and now I became a hero. Oh, nah. Okay, so becoming a hero is the hero's journey, and everybody has to become a hero. We have to, um, face the slings and arrows of life. We have to go through this Job archetype multiple times. It's a cycle. It can happen daily. I mean, I'm having it right now in terms of my troubles with my technology, but I'm adjusting. I'm going to be reborn in a different way. Um, and it just keeps happening. And so everybody has the hero's journey, so called. You can find plenty on the internet about that. And Joseph Campbell wrote extensively about it in Heroes of a Thousand Faces, was his best-selling book back in the 40s. And in Star Wars, in the first um, movie of Star Wars, which is episode 4, you see Luke Skywalker going through all the trials and tribulations of his life and finding out that his anima figure is actually his sister. That was awkward. Uh, and then ultimately at the end, he's marching up in front of a big throng of military type people and he's getting awarded as a hero. But life isn't like that for most of us. For most of us, we're not going to get an award in front of 1,000 people, but the award for you is to have a happy life. Okay, and that's a heroic life, to have a happy life, a real, authentic life. And and that means learning both the rational side and the irrational side. So if you look at our president, he was stuck on the rational side his whole life. And so he built up this empire by hook or by crook, any way he could. And so now he's got this tower in Manhattan and many other buildings around the place and golf courses galore. But is he happy? I don't think there's anybody in the world, including him, that can tell you that he's genuinely happy. He might say he is, but the reality is you can see just by turning on the television and looking at the man that he is not happy. And so he's lived his life entirely on this rational side and not accepted anything really from the irrational side. And of course, his anima led him through 3 marriages and multiple other affairs. So it's not a way to have a authentic, happy life. but you have to understand what it takes to have an authentic life. So then the next lyric is, I say that something like destiny was never my thing, oh nah. Okay, so they're saying that growing up, they never believed in fate or destiny. But Dr. Jung, and as Dr. Stein explained in his book, we all have a destiny, and that's what I was going to read this section from Answer to Job, which I read at the end of yesterday's session. I don't know that I will get to that. Let me see if I can get through the rest of these lyrics, though. And then they say, world peace, no way. A great order, no way. I just going to keep you safe. Okay, so that's an authentic life. So they're understanding that their destiny may not be to totally change the world, although I think they are doing in a way that nobody ever expected. Okay, but they're understanding that their chief role in life in terms of a authentic relationship is to keep their partner safe. And that goes both ways for men and women. And so listen, my baby, let's see, listen, it's just asking to listen, flying high in the sky. So again, they're having this numinous experience of early love and of the magical feelings that brings with the 2 wings you gave me back then. Okay, so that's a numinous experience. Now it's so high up here. So again, they're talking about how they feel. I want you tuned into my eyes. Again, they're referring to the eyes and looking into the camera. And yeah, you're making me a boy with love. And so, okay, so the love is taking over their life. Oh, my. So they're sort of surprised that this is happening because you get to a certain point in adolescence where all of a sudden you say, wow, this is happening to me. And, I remember when I was a little kid and we would drive across the U.S., changing duty stations. My father was a naval officer, and my brother and sister and I would always ask my parents to tell us the story of their courtship. And so we learned from them what their courtship had been like. And so then we finally got to an age where the courtship is actually happening to us. And so we know how it works. And so in love at first sight, you get high very fast. I want to be with you for everything. Okay, that's another courtship thing to say because you want to be with this partner. Oh my, oh my, you got me fly so fast. Well, that's love at first sight, and it's this first sense of being an adult and having the things that happen to adults happen. Now I kind of get it. So now they get it that, the next phase is coming. And this is Mother Nature being imperious and making them come into a relationship so that the species can be reproduced. Love is nothing stronger. Absolutely. This is Mother Nature. She's imperious and she's going to insist. For most people are going to end up reproducing. Than a boy, nothing stronger than a boy with love, but the same could be said than a girl with love as well. And so then there's Halsey smiling and laughing with the boys. Nothing is stronger than a boy with love. And then RM is saying, let me speak frankly, sometimes I was a little stuck up. So now he's referring back to his persona that he has always presented as he's been coming along as an artist. And it's natural to get somewhat inflated. which is a problem, because if you get inflated, you can also get your balloon burst, and you can get pulled back down. And so he's admitting that he was like that, and this is the Persona album, so he's talking about how his persona was like that. Sometimes I was a little stuck up, elevated sky, expanded something, and sometimes I prayed, let me run away. Okay, so when he prayed, let me run away, so um, we can refer back to the Persona um, video that came out first, and in that you see the scene of RM and the genie going up above him, and so this crazy genie, which was a vision that he was having of his persona, um, that got away from him at times. And so sometimes he wanted to run away from that genie. That's what he's saying. And that was a persona, but he understands that. But your pain is my pain. So now we're back to the relationship between a male and a female. And so if you're in a good, authentic relationship with your partner, you're going to feel their pain. Maybe not physically, but you certainly feel it emotionally. Um, and then I missed one line here. When I realized that, I vowed to myself, with the wings of Icarus you gave me. Okay, so in the love relationship, it does make you feel like you're flying, you're so happy and so on. But if it gets out of control, then you fly too near the sun, and then the wax in your wings melts. And so what he's saying by this line is that he's going to fly like Icarus. He's going to fly, but not too close to the sun, because he knows that can be dangerous. And he says it in the next line, not toward the sun, but toward you. So the partner is the sun in a normal relationship. It's not the physical sun, and it's not Halsey, and it's not this boy band, but it's your partner that is making you fly, and you need to fly at their level and toward them as their son. And then he says, let me fly. Oh my, oh my, I waited all my life. Yep. And so when you're a young person, you think, oh wow, I waited all of my life, and all of your life has been 15 years. Well, 15 years is nothing, as you'll soon learn, because when you get up to my age, these periods are very short. And I want to be with you for everything. So this is definitely getting together. And I realize that my phone is now almost out of power. So I'll try to get through this. But looking for something right. I think I missed one line here. Let's go back. So there was, oh my, oh my, and looking for something right. So they're looking for a partner for themselves, and now I kind of get it. I want something stronger, and that's Mother Nature being imperious again. And then a moment, more than a moment, I want love. So this is Mother Nature saying, stop with all the one-night stands. I want to go on and do the next process in my life, which is to experience having a family. And so love is nothing stronger. So we talked about that. Then a boy with love. Okay. And I think that's the end of it. Right. Okay, so I did my best. I hope that helped or was interesting at least. That's from a 72-year-old American man who studied Jungian psychology, and for what it's worth. Um, and and So Nia says, speaking of the language aspect, we could also say BTS courtship inspires young women and men all over the world to learn Korean, which is huge from a cultural point of view, especially in the US. And I agree with that. In Europe, I think most schools mandatorily require one foreign language. And you find people in Belgium and Netherlands, for example, normally speak four languages. Um, and I'm going to pass some of these. So Robobecca said BTS stands out for their message of self-acceptance. They've wanted to give up many times uh, the voices of others, but are overcoming that to accept themselves, definitely. And we all have to do that. In my country, uh, people come out from school and rarely can communicate at least a little in English. People need to be interested in learning. Righto. Okay, so I'm running out of power. If this shuts down, it will be over, I'm sorry to say. Um, and so people need to be interested in learning, and artists help to spark that interest. And I definitely think that's happening. And that's what I'm very, very excited about, because we could never get psychology in the schools in America. We have too many fundamentalists who would argue with one another about what's to be taught. But by this happening with artists, it's going right around all the people that would be impediments to that. Um, and Senator Bush says, I thought that as well. It can be seen as a love song, but I felt it was a love song for Army too. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a love song for Army, but it's also a love song about this stage in their life, which, as I said, now I think this stage of life thing is, their thing in their um, disc, discography, and so that is the story they're telling, which is the story of everybody. Peter says, when young females organically form mass fanatic followings, especially of young male musicians, it makes me think of the Maenads. Well, it also is the way men get molded into something else, because the men have to follow the women. Suga actually compared their albums to the Star Wars saga, but not in chronological order. And that's what it is, very, very correctly. And are you happy, Skip? And I would say yes, I'm very happy. Thank you for asking, Tom. I'm sorry this keeps going out on me. Uh, as an Army, you would know about that because they set it and show it at year-end award shows and interviews before release of this album. Army gave us our wings, yes. And they're going to be doing it even more. I'm really looking forward to see how BTS develops in the next 5 years, because, and I'm going to continue to focus it on this channel, because they're definitely bringing interest to Jungian psychology. And Robobeck, true, I like that it can be interpreted to fit a narrative of love between two people. Exactly, they are so good at with dual meanings and wordplay. Surely all artists get multiple levels of knowledge through in their work. That's what makes them archetypal. Um, and probably part of why BTS has a song called Dionysus, and I did listen to Dionysus, and that's about a coming of age initiation. Um, and it certainly happened to me, but I'm going to talk about Dionysus on another day. In response to Trump thoughts, RM once said that happiness can't occur if one doesn't allow oneself to see any moment as their most beautiful in their life, including transitional periods. Absolutely. And this is a transitional period for me. I acknowledge it, and I realize that everything that I've done on this channel has been preparation for what's happening now, because I wanted to teach Jungian psychology, and I've created 900 videos that do that. So as people are ready for it in their own development, they can go back and listen to my videos, and they'll get a very step-by-step teaching, starting with playlist JRG1, JRG2, and JRG3. But it is definitely an evolutionary moment for this channel, because I recognize that this is the best way to get Jungian thought around the world quickly. And I've been blocked by the universities, I've been blocked by the Jungian analyst community, and the Jungian analysts have a profession, so they want to protect their profession, where they want to charge you $150 an hour. That's great. If you have a mental health issue, you should go to a Jungian analyst. But Dr. Jung taught a lot of things that could save us a lot of deaths around the world if we only understood them. And so BTS is spreading that around the world now, to their great credit, and they're doing it better than Jungian analysts ever have done it. Okay, including Dr. Jung, who is very conservative. And so Berhanu, interesting. I'll have a look that song up. Nia, if happiness is just success and achievements, that it can break. If happiness is the enjoyment of the moment, it's constant. That's a good observation, Nia. And well said, Namjoon. It's his thoughts, right? Okay. Peter says, or Sarah says, it's a high energy rock hip hop song about getting drunk on art and the pain and ecstasy of the artistic process. She was talking about Dionysus there, and I'm not going to get into Dionysus today, but definitely that's what it's about. I've got strength, that's right, but society promotes an idea of attaching happinesses to achievements, and yep, that's what they do. And then you make that achievement, and then you find out, I'm not there yet. And I had business partners who would say, well, if we achieve this, then we're through and we can be happy. And it didn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way. So the demographic of the fan base is 60% of females, 40% of males, and the biggest part of fandom is between 20 and 40 years old, so it's not mass fanatic following of young females. Well, fair enough, but what I would observe, and this is for Avernia, my website, my channel here on YouTube, was getting about 94% males until 3 weeks ago. And when I started to communicate about BTS, suddenly the followers of this YouTube channel has switched to 75% female and 25% male. So there are a lot of females in it. There are people of every age. And the other day when I had my conversation at Sammy's, I had a 77-year-old woman with me at that, and she was really jazzed about what BTS is doing. And Sheklan says, we can be happy in the process of achieving happiness. Like Namjoon said, even being happy in the process of achieving happiness, which I doubt we actually can if we approach it as a goal. That's a good observation. And Senator Bush, I'm 45, so that's true. Okay, we may be near the end here because my battery is dying. But anyway, yeah, that myth wasn't very clear, I don't think. But obviously, if you try to do something beyond what you can achieve, you can get burned by that. I think that was the message of the myth. And Avernia says she's 34, Meritus says 36. Nia, the Icarus image also carries that the person can melt the wax and make the partner fall, which was partially their previous message. Okay, and so obviously if you're a bad partner, you can melt the wax. And Shocklin, I'm barely a legal adult. Why do I feel old? I don't know. Old soul, maybe. Meritus, I'm sorry that I missed most part. My wife, I didn't help. You can see the playback, Meritus. And by the way, I did an interview with Meritus, who's a BTS Army from Brazil, and I intend to edit that interview quite soon. I've interviewed 2 armies so far, besides the ones that are already posted, and I hope to get those posted within the next few days. I've been very busy, and Vernia is right. We have a lot of male fans as well, more than is often mentioned in the mainstream media, and I think men will definitely be attracted to this, although at first they may be shocked. But our parents were shocked by the Beatles and by Elvis Presley, so it's just a change in perspective. BTS has acknowledged this, including a fan-dedicated song. I've got strength. It happens. You may feel younger later and maybe not. And, in fairness, I do feel younger today than I felt a month ago. So this is the most fun I've had in quite a long time. And I'm thrilled with what they have done to change my life. Okay, so, and Meritus, exactly. They're revisiting the past, and the comparison video thing where they were comparing to Singing in the Rain. That's a brilliant little meme that's going around. Take a look at that. That's really cool. I'm not trying to insult BTS or the fans. Peter says I'm thinking of the Beatles and Elvis and the Doors and how BTS seems to be tapping into the same energy. Definitely. That's definitely true. Their revolutionary nature is pretty much the same. Yep, revolutionary natures are always the same. We can talk about that at some point. Meritus, even the sequence of videos are the same as the one of School Love Affair. And School Love Affair, Persona, Boy in Love, Boy with Love. Yep, okay. Sarah says, one of the things I find interesting is how BTS have expressed awareness of the consequences of this effect. Through their music, they also have a song called The Pied Piper addressing this. I'll look forward to seeing that. I haven't had a chance yet. And about achievements, when BTS had their debut on AMA, Suga cried afterward because of fear, and RM felt some emptiness. And you get to some great achievement, and you can feel emptiness, and having enough maturity to recognize that and move on to the next thing is a great achievement. So this new album, which is coming after that, I'm sure for them it feels like a rebirth and an understanding of their own personas and what they were doing before and what they're doing now and what they're trying to do with you Army members in the future. And Shugo was scared of the future. What should they do after this achievement? Well, they've obviously surpassed themselves. And I very much look forward to the music videos for the new songs. And I think I've only seen 2 so far. And to seeing what their next album is. I mean, this is incredible so far. And so, anyway, okay, I've gotten to the bottom of the live chat and I'm fighting my battery. So I am going to discontinue this live stream at this point. I'm sorry I did not address this passage that I read yesterday at the end of yesterday's session from Answer to Job. I will endeavor to get to that maybe tomorrow, because it's an important section and it's important that all armies need to be aware of it. And so I will try to do that tomorrow, but depending on technology and everything. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. It's been fun. I hope I've given at least a quick off-the-cuff reaction to Boy with Love featuring Halsey. That was a great song, and I really like the lyrics that they've put into it, and I love the in-your-face attitude of BTS. There are a lot of young men in the United States who are going to say, whoa, what am I supposed to do now? And so there's going to be a integration period where people have to digest what's just happened and what's going to be happening in the next year. It's going to be a big digestion period. But I look forward to seeing it, and I'll be commenting on it as we go forward. So thank you very much for